Hi, I'm Jessica with Ellie and Mac, and today we're going to be making the Emily Oversized Trapeze Bag. Isn't it cute? So this bag is the one that I think you're going to want to take on vacation. You're going to want to take to picnic or a pool day, maybe even to work. And I'll also tell you that this is the medium-sized bag. And there's also a large. There's no small bag. We want to make sure that you know that the bag is big. So there's a medium and a large, and this is the medium. So what's really neat about this bag? A couple of things. One, the name trapeze. You might be wondering, like, what is a trapeze bag? Okay, so these sides stick out on purpose, and there's little snaps here that you snap together and helps the bag stay that way, and also allows it to like stay kind of closed right here, so there's not such a big gap between the zipper and the side. So it does have a gusset for the zipper, and so you can zip that up. So once you have it zipped up, you can grab the bag here at the shoulder straps and toss it on, and you get to see those fun sides sticking out, and you have a closed bag, but you can still kind of reach your hand in there if you want to grab something quickly, or obviously unzip it. So let's talk about the features of the bag. First of all, we have two front pocket areas, and they're like kind of big because there's a gathering on the bottom, which makes them puff out right here. So you have lots of space. And then on the inside, you have a water bottle pocket, nice and big with elastic, so your water bottle's not going to fall out. But I think this would be great for lots of things, like stick anything in there that you don't want it to fall out. On the opposite side, there is a slip pocket that's divided with a zipper in it, so you have lots of room there. And then you can grab it here at the handles. A couple of our testers also grabbed them like right here to kind of like just grab it and haul it off. And so that's kind of fun. If you need any ideas on how to arrange all your fabric and color block any of it, I do recommend going and looking at the listing of this pattern to see all the testers' fabric choices, because there's some really cute bags there, and I think you'll get some good ideas. Also, so there's rivets here, but you don't have to add rivets. If you'd rather just stitch, that's in the instructions and in this video. So without further ado, let's get started and make this bag. Okay, before you get sewing, there's a couple things that you need to do, and well, it'll take you a little bit. Obviously, you need to get the pieces cut out. When you're cutting the pieces, you need to make sure that you're marking all the markings that are on the pattern. So obviously, you're going to see these big squares here on the front pieces, like they're called the center pieces, and that's where we'll put our straps. And then there are handle markings. There's little stars on the pattern that you'll mark here. And then you'll also see some markings here at the bottom of all the pieces. Be sure to mark these. They look like little squished hexagons, and we'll be sewing down here and stopping at that point, so they're very important. If you have already put the pattern away and you're like, oh crap, they're 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter up from the bottom right here. You can mark these on the center pieces and the side pieces on both the exterior and interior. Now next, you will need to be interfacing. So the interfacing has dashed lines. You can cut out on the dashed lines so that it doesn't go all the way out to the edges of each piece. And that way it'll be out of the seam allowance here. Now, sometimes I do cut mine just a tiny bit bigger than the seam allowance if I'm worried that the interfacing won't stick very well. And so it will come out just a teeny bit further so that when I stitch along there, I'm going to catch just a little bit, but it won't add like a lot of bulk here in the edges. So you'll notice on, this is my exterior, you'll notice on this one that I have a thicker interfacing. This is like a medium to almost heavyweight fusible fleece, and this particular fusible fleece is a lot stiffer than other ones I've seen. You don't need as much stiffness. You can add it if you want to these exterior pieces, but you absolutely need it for this bottom piece. This will help the bag kind of just stay like where you put it. If you've got that bottom piece flopping around too much, then the whole bag will just collapse. And then where the snaps go, you want to add a little bit more. So this is the interior side piece, and you can see where I've marked those where the snaps will go. And then on the back, I've put Decoville Heavy. And so you want just some thicker interfacing. Even though I've interfaced the entire interior with, this is like SF101, it's a light to medium woven interfacing. I've also added these little squares, and I like to cut them from the scraps of the interfacing and then just put them right behind where the snaps go. And the first thing we're going to be working on is the front pocket. So you should have your front pocket marked with the center line. If you don't already have that, you can fold it in half this way and get that marked, or you can even do it this way so that you can mark it on the outside, however you like. And then on the bottom, there should be some lines that you've marked that we're going to gather in between here and here. And you'll notice that this front pocket is a little bit wider than the front center, and that is the gathering here that we're going to do. So let's take this over to the iron and I'll show you what to do next. On this pocket, we're not interfacing it, and the reason is because you're going to see this back part. I guess you could add interfacing, but then when you look down into the pocket, you're going to see the interfacing, so that's up to you. I guess you could back it if you wanted to, but that's not in the instructions, so it's something you have to do additional, and you would just cut the same size fabric for that if you wanted to do it that way, and then just treat it as one. But for mine, I'm not going to add interfacing, and we're going to go to the top of the pocket and this to the wrong side. We're going to fold it on the top to the wrong side by 3/8 inch. So you can kind of measure this however you'd like. So I have this little seam gauge. Do you call this a seam gauge or a hem gauge? I feel like I've heard it both ways, and I'm curious, what do you call this little tool here? But basically you're just going to fold it all along here, and we're going to iron that down into place. Okay, I've got you moved so I can reach in here better. All right, so we have that folded down 3/8 inch and pressed into place, and we're just gonna fold it one more time, the same amount, that 3/8 inch. And so you don't really need a ruler this time. You can just kind of push it against that raw edge up against there and press again. All right, perfect. And then when you've got that all pressed, we're gonna turn it back to the right side. And you can choose to stitch it from either side. Generally, you want to stitch it from the right side so that you have really nice looking stitches all the way across the top. But if you're more comfortable stitching it from the wrong side, that's up to you. Use a stitch length of 3 to 3.5, and you're just going to stitch right above this line here, kind of hemming it into place all along the top. Next, we're going to look at these little markings we made here on the bottom, and we're going to sew a line about 1/4 inch from the edge here with a long basting stitch. So you want to leave your tails long on this side and on this side so that they don't like suck in and we can pull on them. If your fabric is very thick, I recommend making 2 lines. So you could make one at like 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch, something like that. Just because sometimes when you're pulling that basting thread on really thick fabric, your thread can break and then you'll lose all your stitches. And so yeah, I would recommend doing 2 in that case. My fabric's not super thick, so I'm gonna go ahead and just do the 1 line here. So my tail is long here. I've pulled out both the top and bottom threads. And I'm gonna start here and do about 1/4 inch from the edge. Sometimes I like to go back like 1 stitch because we're not back stitching. Sometimes that first stitch like pulls out. So you can go like 1 stitch beyond your line that you've made if you like. And then we're not gonna back stitch. We're just gonna go across. Nope. And then raise your presser foot and pull out so you have a long tail. And then we'll do the same on the other one. Okay, and once you've got those stitches in, we can go on the back side. It doesn't matter if you pull from this side or this side. We're just going to pull the bobbin, I should say, the bobbin stitch from the bottom. Generally, it just is a bit stronger. If you pull it this way, your thread is less likely to break. And we're gonna just continue to gather it just a little bit on both of these. And then we will match that up with the front piece in just a moment. Okay, so here's one of the centers of the exterior, and you can choose whichever one you want to be your front. This will be my front with my pocket. And we're gonna match up this one of the sides here. And you know what, we can actually, before we do that, just because it's a little easier without that on top, is let's fold this one in half and find its center, and then we can match up those centers a little bit easier. And then mark it somehow. I'm just gonna put a clip on there. And then we'll grab, again, our pocket, and we can align it to one of the sides. It doesn't matter if it's the right or left first. And we're gonna just clip along those raw edges here. And then in the centers need to line up. So you can see that there's a line here on my pocket, but my clip's over here. So I've gathered just a little too much, so I'm gonna let a little bit out until those can line up. And then we want this gathering just to be the same length and evenly gathered. So you might have to kind of play with it a little bit and pull it out, move it around. And then once you have it how you like it, just go ahead and clip it into place. Sometimes I like to put a clip right on the end of where the gathering was so that this doesn't pull out. So if you're having issues with that, you can clip it like right there to hold it in place. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, and once you have that all clipped or pinned into place, then we're also going to put some pins right down the center here. So make sure that this pocket is straight all along here. And you can kind of also eyeball between the two handle markings, should be the center here if you haven't like marked it all the way up. And then we're gonna put a pin here all the way along this line because we're gonna sew this down. We are going to baste all the way around here. And then in the middle, we're gonna actually sew, not baste. And you're gonna wanna start here at the top and go all the way down. Make sure you backstitch on both sides. And then here at the top, you can do a little V, like a little crow's foot here, or you can go all the way around and do the triangle. So I'm gonna baste with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You don't need to baste all the way to the 3/8. If you wanna do like somewhere in between there to make sure that you're outside of your basting gathering stitches, then that's probably good too. So maybe just a tiny bit more than a 1/4 inch. Okay, so your front should now look like this with everything basted and sewn into place. Little triangle here at the top, and you'll have a nice gap where you can put things into that pocket. Next, we'll be working on the straps and handles. So first we'll be working on the D-ring strap, if you're making that. So I've got that in interior fabric. And then the handles. So I chose this black fabric for my handles. And so let's take this over to the iron and I'll show you how to make those. Okay, and so for the D-ring strap and the handles, the ends are left raw because they're going to be tucked into a seam. So that's the reason we're starting with these first. And then we'll do the rest of the straps and handles, which are going to finish the edges. It'll be a similar beginning, but a different ending. So because these are black, they'll be a little bit harder to see for you on camera. We're going to do this with the D-ring strap, but it's going to be the same thing for all three of these. So I'm just going to get this pressed, the wrinkles out of it first. And then, so this is my right side. It's like a little shiny. Here's my wrong side. So you're going to put it wrong side up and fold it in half, long ways like this. Match up all those raw edges and press. Give that a good crease there in the center. We'll open that up, and then we are going to fold each of the long raw edges to that center crease and just kind of touch that center crease. We don't want to go over the crease, just touch it. And then the same on the other side. We're going to meet that center. And then we'll fold it again, wrong sides together in half. Okay, and then we'll just take this over to the sewing machine, and we're gonna sew about 1/8 of an inch from this edge and 1/8 of an inch from this edge. And you can use a stitch length of about 3. So we're gonna do the same thing on the handles. Exactly the same thing. So grab your handles and start folding them wrong sides together, just like we did with the other. Okay, so and then for your straps, so you should have 2 side straps and 2 main straps. And make sure that if you're making the medium-sized bag, you know which way these side straps go. It is the long way still. It just might be a little more confusing because they're shorter. And we are going to do the same thing that we did on the other 3 that we just did at the beginning. And then it'll be a little bit different at the end. Fold it in half, wrong sides together, and then you match up these 2 centers, and then you fold it again. But then we're not going to sew anything yet. You're going to unfold it so you have all those creases marked. And then we are going to flip it so that we can see the right side of the fabric and fold it in half, right sides together along that center crease line that we made. Match up those raw edges here at the top, and then fold it once more along those crease lines so that all 4 layers in each of these corners match up. And do your best to try to match them up precisely right here at the edge. And then you want to pin or clip that. And the same thing on the other side. Make sure that it matches up well. And then fold again. And make sure that it matches up well. Now, if your creases aren't perfect, that's okay. It's more important that we match up these exactly like that. And you want to do this all at once. You don't want to like do one side and then the other, because we want them both to fold up this way. Like if you had this one here, but then you folded that one that way, you're going to get some funky stuff happening. So make sure you do this all at once. On the long handles over there too, you just fold it all at once. And then we are going to take this over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew with the seam allowance 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter right here along the raw edges on both sides. Okay, once you have those short edges sewn into place, we're just going to trim down the seam allowance by about half. That way we just reduce some bulk. And then you can also trim here in the corner. Just be careful not to cut your stitches. And then we're going to turn it outright. So if you have a blunt object, I like to keep my chopstick in the room. It will help you press this out. So we're gonna have to turn it out twice. So you're gonna turn it like this and get that edge, that corner nice. And then we're gonna turn again. And then you should be able to fold it back into it being right side out with the ends finished, like this, and just make sure everything's kind of tucked in and looking nice here on all of those corners. And then we'll take it over to the sewing machine and just stitch 1/8 of an inch from this edge and 1/8 of an inch from this edge. I do like to press it one more time. You can see it gets kind of a little bit wonky after all the turning and everything. So if you'd like to do that, you can. And then you'll need to do that for the other side strap and the 2 main straps. Okay, after you've got all those straps and handles made, we're just going to put them on the bag. So we'll start with one of the straps, and you can grab the front center or the back center of the bag. This is obviously the front because it's got the pocket on it. And you should have already made some markings from the pattern pieces. If you haven't, go back and mark where those are. And then we're going to put these on. Now you can choose if you like, you know, this side of the strap better or this side based on, you know, your fabric print or the way your stitching looks. I think I like this side more. And then just make sure that at the top we are twisting, and we're going to place those right here on the markings. And you can choose to pin those into place, which I'm going to do. So just make sure that's right on the marking and pin it. And I'm actually going to pin it up just a little bit higher. That way I can mark where I want to do the next stitches. And then I'm going to grab some tailor's chalk. You can use whatever marking utensil you prefer. So your straps are 1.5 inches wide. But if we go all the way out to the edge with 1.5 inches, like that would look kind of funny to have another stitch there. So what I like to do is have a square. So depending on how far over you made this, it's going to be slightly different, but you can measure what that is. Mine is close to 1.25 inches. And so if we then, I'm going to turn this so I can fit my ruler. If we then have it the other way, the same amount, about where we start that stitching line, then we'll get our square. So I'm going to just mark right here where it's that about 1.25. And that's where I'll draw my line. Just like that. And then we're going to draw an X. So can draw from the edge of that stitching to this corner here, and then the other way as well. And we'll just repeat that for both of these sides as well as the back, and also the straps, the side straps on the sides. So you can just make them all the same, and you can just kind of eyeball it. But I've found that if you don't measure this out, that you end up with kind of different looking squares and X's, and it just doesn't look very uniform. And then I don't know, it just doesn't look as good. So I do recommend at least marking out like where this line is, if not also the X, so that you can eyeball when you get to the sewing machine exactly how big each one should be. Okay, so I'll do this first one with you, and then you can do the other 7. And then we'll move on to the next step. So on this one, I like to start at the bottom. So I have this just aligned with my marking there. And we're going to sew at the same distance that we sewed these ones from the side. So if you sewed yours at exactly 1/8 of an inch, then you can do that same thing here. And we'll start where those stitches start and end here, and then go over them. That way we're not doing like an additional line of stitches here. So I'm going to put that down, and then make sure that your stitch length is like 3 to 3.5, the same as it was there, so that it looks the same. And we'll go up and back stitch. If you get to this end part and you're like, oh, one more stitch is going to put me past that, you can lower your stitch length. So I have mine at like 1.5 here. So, or you can even just hand crank it so that you end right at the right point there, and then move your stitch length back up. And we're going to turn and go around the entire box. And where your chalk line will turn again. And then we'll go back over these. When you get back where you started, that's when you're going to go diagonally. So it looks like my lines are drawn just a little bit lower. I'm going to go down like one more tiny little stitch. And then we'll turn and aim for this corner here. And then I like to go back across the top right here again, because that one only has one row of stitching, whereas these are already doubled up. And then on the other diagonal toward the corner there. And then back stitch. And there you go. There's one of your box with an X, and then you'll just repeat that for the rest of all the straps. So you've got this strap and the one on the back, and then the two side straps on the side pieces as well. All right, now you can say you're an expert sewist of boxes with X's, right? After all those. Okay, let's move on to the handle. So this is my handle, and I'm going to place this on the front and the back centers, but not just on there like with the raw edges aligned. We're going to actually push them up further than that. So you want to go about 3/4 inch above this raw edge, the raw edge of the handle above the raw edge of your exterior on the handle markings here. And I mean, you can choose to put the handle markings there or here. It doesn't really matter, like if they're this close or this close, up to you. I think I'm going to just center mine on there like that, and put it up 3/4 inch above. And that allows us to add either a rivet or a little reinforcement stitch on these handles, since they'll just be tucked into the seam here. So then we'll take this over to the sewing machine, and we're actually going to stitch this twice. So we'll stitch it 1/8 of an inch from the raw edge of the bag seam right here, and then another at 1/4 inch, and do a real stitch, not just a basting stitch. We really want to enforce these handles, since especially for the large bag, you may be carrying a lot of things with these handles, and we don't want them to rip out. Okay, next we're going to do the D-ring. So you should have already folded this when we did all the straps and everything. If you haven't, you can go do that. It's just made this exact same way as the handles. And we're going to slide either a D-ring or a swivel clasp on. It's up to you. The instructions are for D-rings, but when we were testing, people were thinking, oh, what about using this? And then they could just hang their keys or whatever from it. Whatever you like. Or, I mean, I guess you could even put both if you wanted to. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a D-ring on. And so you just slide it on to your D-ring strap there. Fold it in half so these raw edges are aligned. And then we're just going to go ahead and place that right on the D-ring markings. Now do make sure that you put them on the D-ring markings. Like if you put it here, you might end up running into where the strap is when we put the exterior with this. So make sure that you put it over here on the side where the marking was, right there. can just pin or clip that into place. And we're going to do the same thing as we did on the handle. We're going to do 2 lines of stitching here. So you can do one 1/8 of an inch from this raw edge and then 1/4 inch. If you decide to use webbing or a fabric that frays a lot, you can choose to push this up a little bit the same way as we did the handles. That's not in the instructions, but neither is webbing. So, but if you do use webbing or something like that that's tendency to fray, then I would put it up just a little bit higher. I'm going to just go ahead and align mine with the raw edges here, and then go do those 2 lines of stitching. Okay, mine's stitched into place. We'll move on to the water bottle pocket. Now, if you're doing the large size bag, you can fit 2 water bottle pockets on one side. But if you're doing the medium size bag, you can only fit 1. So this is up to you. If you want to do 1 water bottle pocket or 2, or maybe even don't want to do the other side with the pocket that we're going to do next, and you want to do just a water bottle pocket on each side of it. It's cool how you can customize bags however you like. But anyway, let's get started on this. So my fabric, it's a little difficult to tell what is right and wrong side, but it's kind of shiny on this right side. And we are going to fold this right sides together. Go ahead and line up all those raw edges, and then you can clip or pin just these sides into place for now. Okay, I did not add interfacing to mine. You could if you chose to, but I didn't really find that it was needed for the fabrics that I'm using. If you're using like a fabric that wants to fray a lot or is very, very floppy, then you could choose to interface it. Okay, so we've got it to here. The next thing we're going to do is do some measurements and then mark them. So I have tailor's chalk here. You can use whatever you choose. And then we're going to mark 1/4 inch below the fold. So let's turn it this way so it's like our tutorial. And 1/4 inch below the fold, and then another mark 3/8 inches below the first one. So we'll go 1/4 inch. Okay, I changed my mind. I'm going to use the Friction just so you can see it better. These Friction pens are really neat if you've never used them. They erase as soon as you apply any heat, which is good and bad because sometimes you mark something and it disappears on you. But with this, we're going to sew it right away. So 1/4 inch below, and then 3/8 inches below that. Okay, I added a couple clips here just to hold that fold in place as I was making the markings and making sure that they don't move when I get over to the sewing machine. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew from the top fold to that first 1/4 inch line. So it's just a little bit. Make sure you backstitch in here. And we're not going to sew in between the marks that we made. And then we'll sew down and turn and go all the way down to the end right here. And we'll do the same thing on this side. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and turn this right side out through this bottom gap. And you can grab a blunt objects. I just have a chopstick that I like to use to get the corner pushed out nicely here. So you should have like a little corner and then the gap. So you should be able to push out just that little tippity top of the corner. If your fabric's very thick, you could go back and trim just that tiny little corner, but I haven't found that I needed to with this. And then this is our gap right here where we'll put our elastic here in a minute. But first, we're going to go and press this really nicely on the top, on the sides, and then on the bottom, we are going to turn this in to the wrong side, 3/8 of an inch, like that, and press it. Okay, your piece should now look like this. So from whatever you decide is the right side, you can start making some markings. And what we're going to do is mark 1/8 of an inch from the top and 3/4 of an inch from that top fold. So I'm going to turn mine this way just so I can grab the ruler and put it on there as such. And I think from that 1/8 inch, it's going to be pretty easy to just use the sewing machine, so you don't have to mark that. But you can choose to. On this next one for the 3/4 inch, I am going to go ahead and mark that. My sewing machine isn't the greatest for those markings that are a little bit further out. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and sew that top stitch 3/4 inch and then 1/8 inch. So make sure, I mean, if your measurements are off a little bit, it could be a problem. So make sure that your casing can go right here above where the stitching line is. See how mine's below that? So it's going to be like right in that area, and that's where we'll put our elastic. So let's go get that stitched up. Okay, I'm just going to press my stitches here. I just thought maybe if you haven't used the friction pen, you want to see the magic of it. So you can see all those pink marks I made. And then I'm just going to take the iron and press the steam button. And they're all gone. But I have gotten in trouble with them because if you mark it like something that you then need to press, you lost all your markings. But anyway, give that a nice press if your stitches look like mine, and then we'll add that elastic. So we just need a piece of elastic that's 6.5 inches long. What is that in centimeters? 16.5 centimeters for you metric folks. And you want to pre-stretch. So you notice me doing this already. You want to always exercise your elastic before you put it in, or else it will stretch out more and you'll end up with just like a really gaping thing, no matter what you're putting it in. You always want to exercise it. So exercise your elastic and then measure out that 6.5 inches. So you can use a bodkin or a safety pin, whatever you like, to get it through the casing here. I have this little loop turner. I'm going to try it today. I tried this last time I put elastic in and I was like, it was not working. But today I have high hopes for it. So what you do with this one is you actually put it through the casing first and then put your elastic on. And then pull it through. And just make sure it doesn't go all the way through on the one side. So on this side, I'm going to put a little pin in there. Just kind of center the elastic, and it should look a bit like this. And then we're actually, when we sew it, we're going to pull this elastic out a 1/2 inch on each side, and you can kind of just like hold on to it. And then we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And so right here, okay, so I'm going to carefully remove my pin and then pull that elastic out about a 1/2 inch beyond this edge here. And then we'll stitch this down just like that. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, when you're finished here, you can go ahead and trim that elastic, and you can kind of like pull back that 1/4 inch seam allowance a little bit and pull on the elastic. And then when you trim it, it should just kind of pop back inside that hole. Okay, since both the water bottle pocket sides are technically the right side, just put up the face up whichever one you like the best. And then following the markings from the pattern, we're just going to lay this onto the lining that we marked that. And you'll notice it's kind of an interesting shape where it's flat and then it kind of rounds out, because we're going to do the same thing with the water bottle pocket. We're going to let it round out like this. And you should be able to just kind of set it up to where it's the same shape. If you need to adjust the elastic so that these edges come up the same amount, you can do that. And then pin it on. Once you have that all pinned into place, all we're going to do is just top stitch this on. So you can just start right here, and you want to just edge stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, and you can back stitch here at the top really well. And then if you'd like, you can also do like a little triangle here at the top, the same way that we did on the front pocket, and go down, and then we're closing up this gap. So make sure you stitch really nicely along all the layers of fabric there, and then up, and then the same thing over here. And then you'll have your water bottle pocket all ready to go. Okay, you want to gather up all your pieces for the front interior slip and zip pocket, also known as the interior pocket, but it has all these things to it, right? So you have your side piece, the bottom, the 2 tabs for the end of the zippers, and then the top above the zipper. And then a number 5 zipper. This is just nylon coil zipper by the yard. You can also use a pre-made zipper, it doesn't matter, and then just cut it to size if needed. So for the medium bag, which I'm making, it's 6 inches. I'm going to cut not the tape, but the actual teeth to the 6 inches. So see how mine has like a nice place to put it on right there? I'm going to measure from here back and discount this part right here in my measurement. Okay, there's that. And then on this side that I have cut, I need to melt that zipper so that it doesn't fray. So I'm going to grab a lighter. And then if your zipper already has a pull on it, great. If not, get your pull on. Okay, I've got my pull on, and generally you want your zipper to close to the right, but you can choose whichever you like. If you have like a pre-made zipper, then you're not going to be able to have both sides closed. That's okay. You can choose to baste one of the sides closed, or you can just kind of pinch it together when you sew it. So the first thing we're going to do is put the tabs on. Okay, I'm going to grab one of these tabs, and we're going to put it right sides together. So let's see, this will be my right sides together right here at the end of the zipper. Align those raw edges, and then you can pin or clip that into place. And same thing on the other side. And then we will go sew this into place with the 3/8 inch seam allowance on both of these short edges. Okay, once you have those both sewn into place, we're going to go ahead and flip those to the right side this way. You can kind of finger press against the zipper sides here. If your fabric's more fussy, you could press it, but be really careful. Like this nylon coil that I have, for example, will melt. So tread lightly. And then we're going to sew about 1/8 of an inch on the actual tab from the zipper right here on this side and right here on this side. Okay, once you have those top stitched, then we can go ahead and put it with the rest of our pieces. Now this is where it matters if you're wanting to have it closed or open one way or the other. So I'm going to have mine close to the right, and so it will go like this, and we will go ahead and flip that whole zipper assembly on top of this top piece, right sides together. Your tabs are going to be a little bit longer probably than this piece, and that's on purpose, just in case our seam allowances were off just a little bit. It will still be long enough. We can always trim off. We can't add to. So go ahead and center that up. Okay, once you have that all pinned or clipped into place, we will take it to the sewing machine and sew 3/8 of an inch from this edge right here all the way across. So once you finish sewing that seam, go ahead and press that up, and you'll want to go over to your iron and give that a good press up like this. And optionally, you can top stitch about 1/8 of an inch after you've got it all pressed away from that zipper, all along above the zipper along this edge. If at this point you'd like to trim those tabs, you can, if they're sticking a little bit past. And that way it'll be easier to line up those edges. And we'll pin or clip that into place. You can choose to do it like this or the other way. I guess in our instructions it looks like this, so we should keep with that so that it isn't confusing at all. And then just go sew along the seam again with your zipper foot. Okay, after sewing that seam, I also did the same thing as on the top, pressed it and top stitched the bottom. That's optional, you can do it if you like. The next thing we're going to do is take the side interior piece, the right sides together, and flip that on top of here. And then you can pin or clip that side together. And then we'll go sew down this side right here with the regular seam allowance. If you'd like, you can press the seam allowance you just sewed to this left side over here, but don't top stitch it because we're going to do that on the actual bag in just a moment. So grab the backing piece for the interior pocket, and we're going to place that right sides together with this whole constructed pocket. So let's see, that's my right side. And actually, let's go ahead and open up that zipper. You can probably do it from the back, but it might be easier to do it right now. That's how we're going to flip it back. So we're going to pin or clip all the way around this and then sew all the way around it with our regular seam allowance. And then we're going to turn it through that zipper right there. Okay, go ahead and sew all the way around. Okay, once you have that all sewn up, we're going to go ahead and trim all 4 corners just so that we get some nice corners when we turn out. So you can trim it across, not through the stitches, but super close. And then you can also do like one more little trim there to reduce the bulk on all 4. And then go ahead and turn it right side out through the pocket, or I'm sorry, the zipper gap. You can try to kind of get those corners pressed out a little bit, and then we'll use like a chopstick or something to get them pressed out a little bit better. Okay, once you have it all turned out this way, we're going to take it over to the iron and give that a good press. Okay, I have mine all nicely pressed, and in the instructions you can optionally top stitch along this top edge before we put this into the lining. I'm going to do that because I noticed on some of the tester photos, like depending on the fabrics you're using, sometimes this ended up like gaping a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that top stitching along the top edge. I think it will look really nice. So about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Okay, once you're ready to put this on, we are going to find the markings from the pattern of where to put that and line it up so that it's straight across that area. And then we'll pin this into place. Okay, once we have that all pinned into place, we are going to top stitch. We're going to do like a nice little triangle here, and then about 1/8 of an inch from the edge down, across and back up, and the same triangle over here. And then we're also going to stitch right to the left of this seam, about 1/8 of an inch to the left of this seam. You can do a little back stitch here or a triangle to reinforce that area, and then come down and a back stitch here at the bottom. And that way we'll separate this compartment from this compartment and have the entire pocket stitched on. Okay, next we're going to install the snaps on the sides. This is the interior side, and you should already have these marked exactly where they go from the markings on the pattern. And then on the back, we want to put some heavy interfacing. So I actually have like my SF101, basically. It's a different one, but it's basically the same thing on my interior, and then a piece of Decovale heavy on each spot where the snaps will go. And then if you need help installing the snaps, you have a press, but you don't know like how it all goes together. We do have a video on that, so you can find that probably in the instructions or here on YouTube. We can link that. But basically what you do is you're going to punch a hole through each of these spots, and then we're going to put one set of snaps on one side and the same one set of snaps on the other side. And so just make sure you have like your stud and your socket so that these can snap together right here on the same side. Okay, so I have mine installed, and that way they can snap together here on the sides. Okay, we've done all our prep work, so now we can start assembling everything. Yay! So this is one of my interior linings, and we're going to match that up with one of the interior side linings. Down here at the bottom, you should have marked little, like they're kind of hexagons, kind of a smashed hexagon in the pattern. If you haven't marked them, they've worn off or whatever, you don't have them there. They just need to be marked about 3/8, no, not about, actually 3/8 inch above this raw edge right here. So if you need to go back in and mark that 3/8 inch, go ahead and do that. It's super important because we're going to stop sewing right at that 3/8 inch mark. And this will be for all of your main pieces, the centers and sides, the interior and exterior. We need those lines. So we're going to place these right sides together, and we'll pin or clip down this seam here. And we'll sew from the top back stitch here down to that mark right there. So we're going to stop sewing 3/8 of an inch from the bottom of this raw edge, and that will allow us to add the base, the bottom of the bag, and still have the seam allowance to do that. So stop stitching right there where those marks are. Okay, after we have this one stitched on, we are going to place it this way, and then we'll add the next piece, which is the other center, right sides together. And we're just going to keep doing this till we form the full loop of the bag. So we'll place that right sides together, pin or clip along this seam. So the exact same way from the top, back stitching, and then stopping right there at our 3/8 inch and back stitching down there as well. Okay, so now you should have a center connected to a side, connected to a center. So we just need the last side put on. So you can put that right sides together. Make sure if you've got your D-ring clip wherever that we keep that out of the way. Pin or clip and sew it exactly the same way from the top, stopping at that 3/8 inch. Okay, so now you should have a center side, and then we're going to close the loop by putting the first and the last raw edge together. Pin or clip that into place and sew it the exact same way as the last, how many have we done? 3 seams, stopping 3/8 inch from the bottom. And once you have all of those seams sewn up, we're going to take this over to the iron and press all of our seams open like this, all 4 of the seams open. Okay, next we're going to grab our 2 bottom pieces for the lining, and we'll place them right sides together. It doesn't matter which. It has to be the long edges, but otherwise it doesn't matter which one. And we'll pin or clip those on the ends we're going to leave a gap in the middle. That's where we'll turn our bag. And you want about a 5-inch gap in this center part so that you can like get your hand in there, and we're going to birth the bag through this hole. So we need to have enough space in there to pull the whole rest of the bag out. It's like even if you wanted to make it a little bit bigger, that's okay. Just don't make it too small. And make sure you back stitch along both of these areas. And if you'd like, you can actually stitch into the seam allowance just a little bit. So stitch 3/8 inch this way first, and then turn and come this way. Here you go down and then turn. And what that does is it just puts like a seam this way. And when you close it back up later, it's weird. It feels like it shouldn't work, but it actually makes it a little bit easier to close later. Okay, so here's that right angle. It'll probably make more sense if you see it. So we'll stitch at our 3/8 inch, 1 centimeter seam allowance. Up to where we want to leave the gap. And then we'll turn. Just like that. And there's like our little right angle. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, I got that all sewn up and then pressed it from this side and from this side. And then on these ones, when you press them, you just kind of go up to that gap if you did the 90-degree turn. So that's our base. So now we just need to connect that big loop that we sewed to the base. So make sure that you know which is the upside and the downside so that you don't end up sewing this on upside down. But we're going to grab one of the fronts here, the centers, and this is the top here. And then we're going to lay this base right sides together with it. So we're just going to see how we have that gap here. We're going to pull that out and match up the ends like this. So that's the reason that we didn't sew all the way to the bottoms, is so that we could match up on both of these sides the end of that. So you can kind of pull that other seam allowance away and then match up this one here. And then go ahead and continue to pin or clip all along there. Okay. And then on the other side, so this is the, the front or the back, whatever, it's the center. And then here's the other center. We want to match up that long edge of the base to the other side of the center in the same way. So we get that edge right here matched up right there at the corners. And then same on this side. So now you should have both long edges clipped into place or pinned, and then these sides are kind of out like this. And we're going to go ahead and sew along this side and this side, and we're kind of keeping this other part out of the way as we sew it, just like that, and then sew all the way through. If it catches a little bit, it's going to be okay. It's kind of an interesting way to sew the base of the bag, but it allows us to have like all these different color blocking things if we want to on both the interior and exterior. So let's go get this sewn up. So I'm going to pull that away. This is the side piece away from that seam, and then put this underneath my presser foot. If you need to like realign them, it's gonna feel kind of funky. It's a different way to do it, but I promise at the end that it turns out fine. Okay, now that we have those sides, or I'm sorry, the centers sewn in, now we need to sew the sides in. So now we're just going to grab it the other way and pin or clip that into place. And same on the other side. And it should just kind of fit. And if the corners are just like, you're like, what is going on there? Don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay. Just kind of push this out flat, and we're just gonna sew all the way across it. And at the end, you'll see that it looks fine. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and sew across this side and across this side right here. Okay, you should now have your lining fully assembled. Okay, on this lining, we need to trim up the corners so we don't have too much bulk here. So don't go past the stitching line here. Just we're gonna trim off that top part and just a little bit more from the sides here. Just be careful like when you cut this part too, because there's actually 3 spots, right? So you can kind of pull that one away and then trim it. And then let's do the same on the other 3 corners. So we are going to do the same thing that we did on the lining with the exterior. So we're going to grab one of the centers, and you just have to kind of keep the straps and everything out of the way. And then one of the sides, and place those right sides together. And the same thing, we're gonna sew from the top back stitch and then to the bottom, and then stopping at that 3/8 inch before the bottom. And it looks like my markings on here have also disappeared. So if that's the same for you, then you can remark it, or just measure as you get down to the bottom and make sure you stop at that 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter. Okay, once you have that one sewn, we are going to flip it out and put the other center on. Right sides together. And pin or clip, and sew that seam up just the same way again. Okay, now you should have your center, side, center, and then the next is, that's right, side. So get that last side on. You got this. You've already done it. You didn't do what I just did and sewed all the way to the bottom. Maybe you did too. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Did you forget any of the times? Because I definitely forgot once so far. Okay, so you should have center, side, and then we just have to close the loop. Oop, it's getting big. So that one last seam, right sides together. Okay, once you have those all looped up, we are just going to press the seams open like we did on the lining. So take this over to your iron and press all of the seams open like this. Okay, I've got all mine pressed open. Once you have all yours pressed open, we can add the base for this one. So this one doesn't have a gap like the lining because we're not going to flip it through here. So it's just one piece. And then you're going to place that right sides together with your front here, or your center. It could be the back. It doesn't really matter. Okay, once you've got that clipped into place, we can do it also on the opposite side. It's exactly the same as the lining here. But I will add that on this one, you can choose to sew it at the same way as the lining by doing these center parts with the base first, or you can go all the way around all at once. And it feels kind of funky the same way as we did the first time, but it really works either way. It just might be a little bit easier to like manage those corners if you do it with the centers and then clipping the sides into it. But either way is fine. So if you want to, if I can smash the bag down so you can see it well. If you want to just go ahead and clip these in now and then sew all the way around, you can. You just kind of have to like, you pull that as you're sewing this way, and then you pull it back to sew it the other way. So, you know, it's up to you if you want to do it one at a time or just go for it. But, you know, obviously we're going to sew all the way around the base of this into the bag. We're getting so close to being done. Are you excited? I'm excited. I am really loving the way these fabrics are coming together, and I want to see the final bag. Okay, here we're just gonna trim these corners, and don't go into where it like crisscrosses there on the stitching. And then take a little bit more here off the edges. Just be careful, because like when you're cutting that other edge, you're gonna have, you know, 2 spots. So you can kind of trim and trim. We're just trying to take some of that bulk out so that when we flip this right side out, it will look really nice. Moving on to the main zipper. We're so close to being done. Okay, so I've got the length cut from the pattern, and I've melted both of my zipper ends. This is Zipper by the Yard. If you're using one that has a pull, you're going to have to take it off. So just keep that in mind. With the zipper closed, I'm going to measure on one side, 5/8 of an inch from that edge. You can open it a little bit like in the instructions, or you can just keep it closed. It doesn't really matter. Actually, I'm going to flip it this way. So 5/8 of an inch. And then at this point, you do have to open it. So we're going to open it up. And we're going to fold one of these ends to that 5/8 inch mark, just like this. So it looks about like that in the pattern. Okay, now we're going to take that folded edge with the marking right there, and we're going to fold it again, this time to the wrong side. And see, so here's the marking right here at the top that I'm pinching. I'm going to fold that to the teeth there in the back. And what you should get is a folded zipper like this. I'm going to pin this and then I'll show you the back. So this should be scrunched up against the top of that zipper there, and then on the back it kind of makes like a diagonal like that. So we'll do the same thing on this side. Fold it like this along that marking that we made, and then fold it again to the wrong side like that. And then we'll pin that into place as well. It doesn't matter if you pin it from the front or the back. I was just finding it a little easier to pin it from the back on the other one. Once you have those both pinned into place, we're just going to go baste this at the sewing machine, just right here along this edge where it's folded against itself on both sides. So you don't need it to be out super far. It can just be like 1/8 of an inch from that edge like this. You should have 2 pieces for your gusset cut out, and you can choose if you want to interface these or not, depending on your fabric. If it's really lightweight, you'll want to interface it. If it's got a little bit more structure to it, then you probably don't need to. We're going to take this over to the iron and press all of the ends to the wrong side, 3/8 inch, and press into place. Okay, once you have all those pressed, next we're going to fold these in half, just like this, and find the center of each of these gusset pieces. There is a marking on the pattern, but if you didn't mark it, this is an easy way to get that center. And you can mark it however you like. I'm just trimming, but you can also mark it with a pen, a clip, a pin, whatever. I've already actually marked mine right there. That's funny. And it looks like I did it right because it's in the same spot. Okay. And next, that center marking is where we're going to align that zipper that we just fixed up. So go ahead and separate the zipper like this. And we are going to pin or clip the wrong side of each of the zipper to the right side of the gusset. So, and we want the turn right there to come this way like this. So find exactly where that center was, and right at the end of, so here's the center. Let me mark that a little better for you so you can see it. So I can see it too. Right there where that notch is the center. So we're gonna line this right here, and mine kind of comes off a little bit, so I'm gonna align the zipper tape with the end here, but the top will be aligned where it turns right with the center. Like that. And then we will clip that into place. And keep this end folded in, the end of the gusset where we had pressed it. Okay, so what you should have is nothing up here. Your zipper starts at the center, and then the zipper's super long and it hangs off the end here. And then we're going to do the exact same thing on this other gusset, as we'll align it right here at the center so that these are going to match up. Okay, and then we're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and we're going to baste these zippers on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down here. Okay, once you've got those basted on, we are going to grab that side of the gusset that doesn't have anything on it and fold it right sides together with itself, sandwiching the zipper in between and keeping that folded edge there at the bottom. And at the top, that zipper should just be sitting right in there like that. And then you can pin or clip that into place right along that edge, sandwiching the zipper inside. And the same on the other one. Okay, once you've got those all pinned or clipped into place, we are going to sew this time with a zipper foot 3/8 inch from this seam here all the way down on both, and make sure both of these stay clipped into place, and you want them to match up. So if one is folded more than the other, or if it needs to be folded a little bit less, you can play with that just a little bit so that those two ends match up. We're going to trim each of these corners right here just so that they aren't sticking out when we sew all together. Do not trim the zipper. And then we're going to flip that over and pull the zipper out like this all along here. And then you can go press this with your iron or roll it, depending on what type of, fabric and zipper you have. But you want this to all be straight because we're going to top stitch across the top of this. So after you get it all nicely pressed, we are going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from this edge, and then from the edge of this fabric all the way up and back. And then on this open side with the raw edges, we'll just baste that closed so that it's all nicely finished. Same with this one. And then after you do that, we're going to be ready to put this on our bag. Grab your exterior, and we're going to put these gusset pieces on. And what you want is for the gusset to be right sides together with the centers of the bag. The right side of the zipper will be facing the right side of the bag exterior. So look at your zipper and make sure you have it the right way. And then you also need to think about like which way you'd like your zipper to be on. So if you want your zipper to close to the right, it's going to close up this way. And so we're going to put it on like this. So we have the right side of the zipper. We have our end here. This is the front of the bag. Put it right sides down like this. And you're going to match up the front here. So don't put it over on the side. We just want it on the front. And pin or clip that into place all along. And on the opposite side, we want to make sure that our zippers are going to match up. So make sure that you also put it right sides with the same side with the tails. So I have my tails going off to the left here. So I'm going to do the same on this side. Align it with that front or the back center, I should say. And the zipper again is right sides together with the bag. And then we're going to go baste these into place with like a scant 3/8 inch or a 1/4 inch seam allowance if you're worried about it, just so we don't see our stitches later. On both sides of the bag on these gussets. Okay, so as you're basting these on, just make sure that your strap stays out of the way and that your handle doesn't end up crooked as you go through here, because you are stitching it possibly just a little bit lower than it was. Okay, so you should have those stitched, and then they should flip out and be the right side of the zipper facing up. Okay, I've brought you over to my bigger table so you can see what's going to happen here. So we have our exterior bag right side out, and then we're going to have the lining wrong side out, and we're going to put the exterior into the interior. So if you want like these bags, or I'm sorry, the slip pockets, the water bottle pocket on one side or the other of the bag, you can think about whether you want to flip this. If you don't care, you just need to make sure that you're aligning, obviously, the centers of the exterior and lining and the sides. So this doesn't have to fit perfectly, but we do need to be able to align the tops here. So stuff it down in there far enough that you can. You also want to stuff everything from the exterior down in there. So the handles, the straps, the gusset, it all needs to be stuffed down so that we can just align the top raw edges of the exterior and lining. And then you can grab your pins or your clips and start at one of these corners, and we're going to align the seams here. And then it doesn't matter which way you go, but you just want to make sure that everything is right sides together and aligned at each of the seams. Oops, see, now my gusset's over here popping out and everything. We need to stuff all that down inside. Okay, once you have everything pinned or clipped into place, we're just going to sew all the way around the top of the bag. On some of these parts, like the handles, it's going to be pretty thick, so think about your needle if you need to go up. And if you've got a machine that's not as heavy duty, just go really slow over these areas, and then you should be fine. And when we're all done, then we're going to flip it from that bottom hole. So you go all the way around. And if you need to like stick your hand in there and just make sure that anything isn't popping up, you can also do that. Okay, now we're gonna grab from the lining hole. We're gonna reach inside and start turning the bag. You wanna do this somewhat carefully so you're not getting the interfacing like too pulled on and crumpled up, but you kind of gotta just work it and get it all out. It might take you a little bit of time, especially if you're making the large bag or if your interfacing is very stiff. Might take you a bit, but just keep pulling and eventually it'll turn right side out. Ooh, it looks so good. How does your bag look? I want to know. Let me know at the end of this video and when you finish your bag how it looks. I am loving that. So cute. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is go press all of these areas at the top, that seam that we just sewed, and press that lining down and make sure all the way around on both sides that the lining is pressed down. And then we can just top stitch all along here, all the way around, all the way around the bag. About 1/8 of an inch from that seam right there, but make sure you press first or else you're going to have your lining like pushing up into it and you don't want that. Okay, so I've got mine all pressed and we're going to go all the way around from the right side, but we're going to make sure that this whole time that the lining is pressed down. One thing is I do have my D-ring strap up because on mine, if I flip it down, I'll show you. It kind of does this weird like bunching thing on the back. So I'm just going to leave it up. And if it kind of hangs out a little bit like that, I'm okay with that because it's going to hold whatever I want in there and I'll be able to see it. So I'm going to just pin that up to the gusset here. And that way I won't catch it when I'm going around. So. Okay, next we need to secure handles if you'd like. So, I mean, this is probably a good idea. You do have three or four stitches on this handle already, but if you're worried about it and if you plan on carrying some heavy things, books or something, you may want to secure this handle just a little bit more. So there's two options. One is you can add a rivet, and that's the reason we left the handle longer. See, it kind of extends down to here. So you can put a rivet right here in the center. Or you can do a little V. So I'll just draw in how you would do that. So you can kind of use this stitch here and go over that once more if you'd like, and then just make a V. See if that shows up for you. You can kind of see it, right? So it just comes down like this. And try to make it even. You can draw it like this, and that way you can pivot right here at the V. And then just do that for 1, 2, 3, 4, or add those rivets right there in the center. And you should have enough thickness there. So it will go all the way through if you do the rivet or the stitches to the back here. And just, you can make your little mark there and do it that way. And that way it'll be really secure. Okay, additionally, we need to secure the straps, pin this into place, and you can actually put it up here on the gusset if you'd like, because we are going to stitch right here below the gusset, not on the gusset, but onto the bag. And it's basically the same as that handle. You'll do a V, so you can kind of stitch right here, almost in the ditch, like you can see your stitching lines on either side. Stitch right across there, and then the V right here. Inside the bag, you should still have that gap in the lining here. And so there's two options on how you want to close this up. You can either hand stitch this closed, so you would use a ladder stitch, and you can pin or clip that gap closed first before you start stitching, and just go ahead and refold all of those pressed areas like that, and then do your ladder stitch across, all the way across this to close it up. Or you can machine stitch it, which I'm probably going to just machine stitch it. Basically the same thing, but you're just going to go ahead and fold them all like this, and then sew about 1/8 of an inch from that folded edge all the way across. Make sure you're catching both of those sides of the fabric, and then your inside will be all closed up. Now this isn't in the instructions, but I was thinking, like, if you wanted to and you had something you want to put in the bottom to keep your bag really upright, like mine stays pretty upright because I've got a pretty thick interfacing in the bottom. But if you really wanted to make sure that your bag stays firm and upright, you could put something in the bottom through this gap before you close it. That's totally up to you. And like I said, it's not in the instructions, so that's just an additional little thing I'm saying if you wanted to do that. So if you wanted to hand sew or machine sew, go ahead and do that right now. So I decided to do rivets on the handles, and I'm going to stitch the straps. You can do it whichever way you like. Okay, I have my rivets in, or you could have done stitching, and I've got my triangles in. And I actually just measured this triangle here and then tried to do the same triangle above, so they kind of look, you know, cohesive. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is get our zipper pull on. So grab the zipper ends. I have this handy little zipper jig that I use, and so I'm going to use that, but however you like to get your pulls on is great. Okay, if you like how your pull went on, great. I'm trying to decide, there's like one extra tooth on that side. Do I fix it or do I go with it? I think I gotta fix it. Ah, better. Okay, so once you have your pull on, then we're going to work on the zipper tab. If you'd like to use like the metal type of zipper ends, what you do is you just fold the zipper up like that, and then usually you slide the ends on, and then there's little screws. But we're going to do the fabric type because everyone has a little scrap of fabric they can use for that. So let's get started on this part. Okay, I have the bag put to the side just for a second so that we can start with this. So here's your zipper tab. It is a rectangle, so this is that long side. We're going to fold that in half. It doesn't really matter on this part if you do wrong or right sides together. We're just getting that center crease. Just like this. And then we'll grab our zipper. So you're going to kind of have to just fuss with the bag being there. But here's that piece. And we'll put this up, but right sides together with that zipper. So here's the right side of the zipper. We're going to center up that crease that we made with the center of the zipper. And then you can pin or clip that short side on, like right here. Just like that. And then we are going to flip it over so we can see this side and take it over to the sewing machine. And we're going to sew just across the zipper with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Back stitch at both ends, but don't sew onto these parts here, just the zipper itself. Okay, so we're going to flip it to this side so we can see the wrong side of the zipper facing up. and using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So make sure you use a 1/2 inch, that part's important. We're going to start here at the side of the zipper, stitch onto it and back stitch, and then across the zipper, and then stop right there at the end of the zipper. If you use a metal zipper or like a welded zipper, make sure you hand crank through that part with the zipper teeth. Okay, and then we're going to take this back over to the iron and do some pressing. Okay, after we have that stitched, we're going to pull this out just like this, and we are going to press. So keep the seam allowance here on the sides so that it's folded that 1/2 inch to the wrong side here at the end of the tab. And we're just going to go ahead and press those sides just like that. And then we will fold these sides toward the zipper. So make sure you really hug the zipper side like this. And then however much it folds there, we're going to continue that line down. And same on the other side. Okay, now we'll fold this short raw end here to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Now we're going to fold this. You're not going to go all the way up to the top of the zipper. You're just folding it enough so that you're covering, like you're just kind of right even with these edges here. So it will kind of stick off just a little bit on this side. I can hold that up so you can see my side here. So we're not going to go all the way up to this part. We're just going to make it meet the end of that. And then press that into place. Okay, and then once you've got that pressed, that little folded end, we're actually going to tuck it up under these parts here. So this part is a little bit finicky, but just do your best to tuck them underneath. Once you have it tucked how you like, you can give that another good press. You can check it from the front and make sure everything is looking good too. It seems like the sides sometimes want to pop out a little, so you can kind of press those in again with your hand and then use the iron to set that. And then you'll take this over to the sewing machine and you're just going to stitch all the way around it. So just make a big nice square like that. And what's nice is that this part should be up just a little bit higher in the back than the front. So you'll definitely catch that as you go around. And that is the zipper tab, and you'll be all finished. Okay, we're all finished. I would love to know in the comments how your bag turned out. I'm so excited for you. Is it everything you dreamed of? Are you going to make another one? Let me know all your hopes and dreams about your bags. I'm just kidding. No, but if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. We'd love a like and a subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. This channel, if you didn't know, has over, I think, 600 or 700 videos now that you can just watch and find out so much more about sewing. There's clothing tutorials as well as these sort of bag tutorials. So anyway, we'll catch you next time.